And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the Jeff Mara Podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Christian Koncz. Christian had a near-death experience following an accident, and today we're going to talk about that and his other paranormal experiences. Christian, thank you so much for being my guest, and welcome.
Hi, Jeff. Thanks very much for having me. It's really a pleasure and a very nice experience to be on your podcast. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. And one great thing is my audience likes me to get guests from other parts of the world. And today we have Christian coming in from Hungary.
Yes, indeed. I'm in Hungary. And the experience I'm going to talk about, it's actually happened in London. That's where I was living at the time. And I kind of lived in different countries during my childhood and adult life as well. So I spent a few years in India as a child, and then as an adult, I lived in the UK, in Ireland, and in Singapore, and now I'm back in Hungary. So this is where I'm talking from. So the experience happened in London. This was probably around 2013, 2014. I didn't really make a note of the exact date, which is in contrast with the other experience I'm also going to talk about. You must also understand that I had a Kundalini Awakening experience prior to this, which, if you don't know, is a sort of surging energy that starts from the base of the spine and rises up to the very top of the skull, basically. And it breaks through the energetic barrier that's at the very top of the skull, just next to the crown chakra, basically. And this creates an opening, which makes it easier for the person who has experienced this to leave their body. So this is what usually Buddhists and Hindus think, that when a person dies and the soul exits the body, it actually leaves towards the top of the head, is the top back part. And so it was quite interesting that this NDE happened in London. And I basically slipped in the bathtub and flew back at quite a pace, hit my head at exactly the spot where your soul is supposed to leave your body upon death. And so I just flew out of my body. And I was outside of it for several minutes. And I found myself floating above my body. And it was a bit like being in water. So when you're swimming and you're sort of on your belly, swimming, that's basically the position I found myself in. And it was quite interesting because my flatmate at the time, who's Israeli, he was calling my name, trying to find out what had happened to me. And I could hear him, but his voice came through as it was through water, basically. So I could hear his voice, but it was kind of distant. And it was like being in the pool underwater and hearing somebody talking to you. So that's basically how it felt. And the interesting thing is that I felt larger than usual. So I expanded a bit. And as I was looking around, I could see the bathroom and I could see the light above me. But I found it quite difficult to move or to turn around. So I started sort of flailing my arms as if I were trying to swim. And I slowly turned around, looking towards the door. And I could hear my flatmate calling my name, but I couldn't open the the door, obviously. I mean, I wasn't in a physical state. And I could actually sense a light above my head, which is sort of silvery white light that I sort of felt it calling towards me, but I kind of knew what it was. Didn't really feel like I should go towards the light or anything like that. I was just floating above my own body. And I could actually look down. And as I looked down, my body was lying there face up. So it was actually looking up at me, and my eyes were closed. And I was looking down on my own body. And so basically I grew a bit worried because I knew my flatmate was calling my name and I could hear it distantly. So then I thought, okay, well, this is not going to be good for anyone if I stay here. I should go back. Mm. And then as I had this thought, I started shrinking and sort of swirling around in like spiraling motion. And as I started going down, basically, and I got smaller, and it was a bit like letting water down the drain. So it was like a mini tornado. And so I started spinning around. I saw the room spinning. And I could still see outside. So I could see the ceiling of the bathroom while it was spinning. And then I started shrinking and I got back into my body. So I finally found myself back in my body. And but I couldn't move for a while, so I was quite hurt. And then very slowly I started moving my arms and my legs, and then I started feeling the pain. So then I knew I was better. And then it took me a few minutes until I managed to get on my feet and open the bathroom and tell my flatmate that everything was okay. Although I had a big bump at the back of my head for probably several days. But yeah, so that's what happened. That was my near NDE, you could say. Mm-hmm. Almost.
Well, that was a really fascinating story. I appreciate you sharing it. One of the things that I found very interesting was when you were hearing your flatmate, it sounded like he was underwater. I've never
like I was underwater, yeah.
While you were out, did you have any feeling of peace or love or relaxation?
Yes, it was a very peaceful and relaxed experience. It wasn't the first time I experienced being outside my body, so it wasn't completely new to me. Mm-hmm. It was a very similar experience to when I had some mystical experiences, or I did astral travel a couple of times, and it was very noteworthy that the feeling was actually exactly the same. So yeah, I was there, not in my body, but my personhood, myself, that was actually present. And so when this kind of thing happens to you, you just realize that you are not your body. Mm-hmm. Yourself, your personhood has nothing to do with your body. Mm-hmm. You have something similar to an astral body, perhaps. This is what people usually call it. Or you could call it a soul or a spirit, but this is separate from your physical body. So that becomes quite obvious once you have an experience like this.
At any point in time, were you thinking, okay, I'm out of my body now, I guess that fall must have knocked me out, or, kind of the realization that you're out and it was a consequence of the fall?
Yes, I was aware. I was fully aware of everything, but I wasn't worried. I actually enjoyed the experience. So being outside your body is very pleasant, actually. It's a bit like being in space and floating around and having a good time, to be honest. So I think anybody who experiences this, they usually don't like coming back.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you come back into your body, it's quite constraining. It's restrictive. It feels like a prison.
Mm-hmm.
And you feel like you are shut into a small space. So it's quite claustrophobic as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, but the highlight is always being outside your body, not the coming back.
Right. I was going to ask if when you came back, did you feel like you were just stuffed back in your body?
Yes, exactly. Although it was more of well, it's kind of hard to explain, but I fell back into my body would be the best expression, I would say.
And after doing so many of these interviews, you are the first person to describe re-entering the body, kind of like going through a reverse tunnel.
Yes, and it's also similar to what you see in cartoons. If you've ever seen like Aladdin, where there's the genie in the lamp. And usually when the genie goes back into the lamp, it's a sort of spiraling motion.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's probably quite similar to that. It's like going back into a small container
Mm-hmm.
that's actually much smaller than yourself.
You know, it's funny is I had this conversation with someone else before, and I'd wondered that if the origin of the story comes from somebody who had a near-death experience like you did and kind of came up with that idea of the genie in the bottle and forcing the spirit back in.
Yes, probably.
A lot of people will say that they go through a tunnel when they're on the way out of their body, or once they're out of their body, then they go through a tunnel. Have you ever experienced the tunnel? And do you think leaving your body is also going through a tunnel, or the going through a tunnel that people experience is going to another dimension once you're already out?
Well, it's difficult to say whether this is another dimension. I think in this case, when I had this particular NDE, I was just slightly shifted into maybe a parallel dimension, I would say. So I was still in the same place.
Mm-hmm.
I just couldn't interact with it.
Right.
And I did not have the experience of going through the tunnel as such. It's more that I was the tunnel itself. So I became a sort of gateway,
Mm-hmm.
if you can picture that. So if you think about a tunnel or a wormhole, it's usually it usually goes between 2 points in space-time, or perhaps 2 different dimensions,
Mm-hmm.
or parallel universes. So in this case, my entire being was the tunnel itself.
Mm.
That's what it felt like.
Do you feel like this experience changed you in any way spiritually, like you were transformed by it, or it was just kind of a simple thing that happened to you and maybe you had transformed by your previous Kundalini experience?
This one was quite simple, so it didn't really change me in any particular way. It was the Kundalini experience before that brought the big changes in my life.
Okay. If you don't mind, can you tell us about that one?
Yes. So, well, I have to give a bit of a background to that.
Mm-hmm.
So I started meditating when I was 13, and I was always quite interested in spiritual topics and books, and started reading up on that. I did a bit of yoga, although not very seriously, just the basics of meditation and poses and breath work and that kind of thing. But I continued my own practice into my 30s with pretty big gaps, because during the time I lived in Ireland as an adult, I sort of started losing faith, because I was brought up as a Roman Catholic, and that was the time when a lot of the big scandals around the church started coming out with and slavery and that kind of thing. And so I wasn't really sure I wanted to continue being a Catholic. And so I gradually lost faith and became an atheist. But I was still interested in spirituality. So at around age 30, I started working on it a bit more seriously with daily meditations. And I was living in London at the time. And I took daily walks around the River Thames and St. Paul's Cathedral and that sort of central part of London, which, for those that don't know, is actually a pretty important center point on the Earth's energetic grid. So there's a lot of sacred geometry and different energetic vehicles or constructs in the form of cathedrals and stone circles and Templar churches and that sort of thing that are centered on that area. And this is actually where I was living myself and where I was working. So I spent a lot of time there. And so I took up meditation again more seriously, and I did energy work on myself and breath work and that sort of thing. And I started going to the British Museum in London and visiting it at least once a week, sometimes with my friend who was also interested. And I was drawn to the Sumerian and Assyrian exhibits within the museum, which are mostly from the city of Uruk in Sumer, which was later to be Assyria. And this was actually the holy city of the goddess Inanna Ishtar, who was a major goddess in the Middle East thousands of years ago. And some remnants of her worship still survive today in different forms. Just something I can discuss maybe some other time. Mm-hmm. And so I felt drawn to these artifacts from ancient Sumer and Assyria straight away. There are some pretty famous ones like the Burney relief over there, and different statues and even personal artifacts that are associated with the worship of these ancient Sumerian gods. And so I felt kind of close to them and energetically connected. So I started doing research and trying to find out what it was all about. And then I found that my Kundalini Awakening was actually progressing quite nicely, which started at the base of my spine. So there was, first I could feel heat and a bit of pressure. There's always a sensation of light, which you can sense that obviously you cannot see with your physical eyes because it's not physical light. It's astral light, you could say. And then as my Kundalini started rising, it took a couple of years until it got to my heart chakra. And then it got stuck and started experiencing chest pain and heart palpitations and various nervous symptoms. So I forgot some pretty major things, and I found myself being barely able to function. Obviously, I still had to go to work, and I had a social life and whatnot. And so I found myself stuck, not knowing what to do. I didn't have a teacher in yoga who could assist me, and I didn't know anyone. So I was just doing my own thing. And then after a visit to the British Museum, I was actually near St. Paul's Cathedral in the city of London, which is also where my office was. And I felt that I had to ask for help. And I didn't direct it particularly to anyone, but I had this image in my mind, which was a stone relief that I've just visited in the British Museum from the city of Uruk, which actually shows the god Enki sprinkling holy water with a pine cone, holding a pine cone in his hand, and sprinkling holy water on this king, showing basically his that he's being anointed to be the king. And this custom of sprinkling someone with holy water, this actually comes from Sumer. So that's where it actually originates. And so I sort of prayed, even though I was an atheist pretty much up to that point. But I thought, I can't lose anything. I need help. So I asked this god, I didn't say a name, just thinking about that image, and said, if you can give me help, I would really appreciate it. If you can send someone to assist me, that would be even better. And then I felt this download of energy. Like I said, this was very near St. Paul's Cathedral. I was near the cathedral gardens where I used to go to meditate. And I felt a beam of energy coming down, like maybe white light that entered my brain and my whole body, and I felt it suffusing me. So I thought, okay, well, this seems to do something. It seems to work. So I was quite hopeful that something positive would happen. And the next day I was in my apartment, which was near the River Thames and not far from Tower Bridge in London. And as I was washing up, I felt this presence enter the room from slightly above me and towards the back. It actually felt like a second sun, like sun was opening up and radiating its rays upon me. And I felt these rays, which were quite hot and had a very strong radiance, sort of caressing me from the back, like you would when you're outside in the sun. And I thought, this is very strange because there is no window on that wall. So I said, where is this light coming from? So I turned around and I saw this white light that looked just like a sun. And then I realized that, I got a visitation of some sort. Somebody visited me. And it had a very strong, benevolent and loving presence. So it was like, I knew it was a deity of sorts. I didn't know exactly at that time who it was. But I could also feel that it was a female presence, which is something you can tell even with a physical person. Like if you are in a room and somebody walks in without them seeing you, you will often know whether that person is male or female, just from the vibe that you're getting. So I think everybody has experienced this. So I couldn't see anything apart from the light, but I knew somebody was there and I could feel their presence and their intentions. Do you have any questions at this point?
I do, but I don't know if I want to interrupt you yet.
Okay.
I want to keep the story going.
Okay, all right.
Mm-hmm.
So this person came into the room, and of course it wasn't a human being. It was a being of light, which is the best way to explain it. And it was a white light, very bright, quite hot. And I could sort of feel some of this light coming out of the center and touching me, sort of enveloping me in a way. So I realized that this light being actually has maybe tentacles made of light would be a good way to explain it. So definitely, it wasn't a human body the way we think about it, but some sort of light being. So she touched me. And actually what happened at that point is that she got behind my back, or maybe I turned around, I don't really remember. But she communicated with me telepathically. So she communicated intentions and feelings and emotions. And so I knew why she was there and what she wanted, but I couldn't hear any words. It was just an exchange of energy, basically. And so what she did is she touched me from behind, and she touched my back. And I could actually feel something like a hand touching me. And it felt very real. So it didn't feel like something that is just astral or spiritual. It felt like a real human touch. And so as she touched me, I felt this surge of energy. And of course, it was my heart chakra that was blocked. And later on, I discovered why this was. It was basically because of my atheist convictions and beliefs, which blocked my heart, to be honest. But she gave me this energy, and I felt a huge surge, which is very similar to what a Kundalini surge generally feels like anyway. But it was much more powerful. So she gave me significantly more energy than I had on my own, and started searching all over my body. And I felt that I was filled with light. So my entire body was filled with this light energy. And as you know, there are energetic pathways within the body, which are a bit like veins, but instead of blood, they carry this sort of liquid energy, liquid light, you could say. And these are called NDEs by the Hindus. And so I could feel these energetic pathways being filled with this liquid light. And it surged all over my body. And then I could feel the blockages clearing up. So it was like when you have a drain that's blocked and you just use like a pressure hose or highly pressurized water to unblock it. And that started happening all over my body. So the blockages were removed. And the energy managed to go through my heart and then up along the spine all the way up into my head. And so I felt quite relieved. And then I thought, okay, I have to lie down because this was such an overwhelming experience. I actually didn't know what else to do. So I just went into my room without saying anything, and I had to lie down. Because usually when you experience Kundalini, it's most of the time best to lie down, because it can cause some quite interesting effects in terms of what are called kriyas, which are involuntary movements that are caused by the surge of energy, because this affects the nerves in your body. So you might move around, trash around a bit, things like that. But so there was this huge surge of energy that I just had to deal with. And so I went into my room and I lied down and basically tried to process the experience. And my Kundalini started activating from the base, and it went up quite quickly all the way to the top of my head. which is it never actually went that far before. So this took maybe, I would say, quite a few minutes, maybe even 20 minutes. And then again, I found myself stuck in a way, because it went all the way to the top of my head, here in the back. But then it started bumping against my skull in a sort of rhythmic fashion. Usually the Kundalini energy is imagined to be a snake, and the head of the snake always tries to break through and sort of come out at the back and peek out in a way, which you can see. You can see this is usually depicted like that in Egyptian art with the pharaohs, for instance, with the snake on their forehead. Or you see, when you see pictures or paintings of the Buddha, it's usually shown with a snake behind him, usually a 7-headed snake. So these are all symbolic of the same thing, basically. And so I found myself stuck again, and the Kundalini couldn't move to the very, very top. So this is the final knot that the Kundalini has to break through. And then I actually realized that this person, this goddess, was still there, and she floated into the room. It's very hard to explain, but she was definitely floating above the ground by maybe 3-4 feet, or about 1 meter. And I cannot say whether the light that was coming from her, whether that was physically visible, or whether I just saw it with my astral senses or my third eye. But I couldn't differentiate at that point. But I saw her as this sort of current light. So she wasn't disparate, but she had a body of sorts that was made entirely of light. And I'm guessing it was probably held together by some sort of electromagnetic field, because there's definitely that kind of effect in the room. And so she floated towards me, and I was actually lying down, and she floated above me. And then I realized that she wanted to help me to complete the process. So she started enveloping me in this light, and she even reached into me with her light tendrils, you could say. And I managed to completely merge with her in a way. So we became one. And she gave me her own energy and her own light. And this caused such a surge of Kundalini in me that it basically broke through. And I could hear this tearing sound as that happened. And there was this tearing sound, and I could feel the top back part of my head opening up. And so first, this serpent of energy actually burst out, and I could feel it sort of peeking out. But then the second thing that happened is that liquid light, bright white light that was very hot and actually very pleasant feeling, started flowing into my brain. And I could feel it coming down like a waterfall, I would say. And I could even hear the sound. So it was like the sound of a waterfall. And this liquid energy just rushed into my brain, and it enveloped my whole body. And so it was just pure ecstasy and joy and happiness and love. And I started having flashes of realization. So I started understanding things about the world and what was happening to me that I didn't understand before. And then I realized that I was no longer in my body, and I started expanding. And then I realized I wasn't even on Earth anymore. I was not anywhere. It was a sort of dimensionless void. And I was the light within this void. And I started expanding, but it was like expanding into infinity. So I was universal. And there were no limitations in terms of time and space or dimensions. I expanded in all directions. And I felt infinitely happy and loved. And in that state, because I was no longer in my body, I was fully conscious for the first time in my life. And I had this weird experience of omniscience, of understanding everything and knowing everything. And I felt like I had access to all the knowledge in the universe. And so in this expansive state, I kind of understood what it meant to exist in a unitive state and to be universal, to be one with everything, to be one with God, or whatever you want to call it. And but then I knew I had to come back into my body. So I spent some time there. And I knew that I would only understand a fraction of what I understood in this state. That what I would bring back into my body would be a very small portion of the knowledge that was available to me in that universal state. So I gradually started shrinking. And I would say that in the universal state, I was probably as big as the universe itself. So I was my own universe, you could say that. And then I started coming back and I started shrinking. And then the experience of coming back was somewhat similar to my NDE, in that again I felt constrained and imprisoned in my own body as I came back. But then I also felt very happy because I knew this experience had happened to me, and I was given a gift, a spiritual gift, and divine grace, probably you could say. And like I said, I could only remember a very tiny fraction of what I understood in that state, but it was a lot more than before. So I gained a lot of knowledge and wisdom through this. And by the time I returned to my body, this presence was gone already. So she already flew away to wherever she came from. And so that was the experience.
You asked or prayed for help, and you were asking the Sumerian god, I believe. Did you do that while you were inside the cathedral, or were you on the grounds of the cathedral? Or in the...
No, I was nearby.
And then the woman that helped you, she's not the god that you were praying to. Maybe the god had sent her to help you.
Yes. Later I understood that because she sent me lucid dreams where I met her later on. And then she explained to me that her name was Inanna, which I wasn't sure about at that point. And so she sent several lucid dreams to me where I was with her, and I saw her in different situations, which usually took part in the future. So you could say that they were visions of a sort. And then it took many years, but later I actually learned to communicate with her more or less sufficiently. So it's always difficult because when you're dealing with telepathic communication, you get intentions and feelings, and you might get phrases or words. You might get small visions, or pictures might flash in front of your mind's eye. But it's never such an exact communication as what you would have verbally. But then your brain has to learn to create words and sentences out of the telepathic communication that you get. But that took many years, and then, as time progressed, she visited me many times afterwards, not in this form, but in a sort of more astral form, or just in terms of connecting to me telepathically. But this was the only time that she was almost physical, in a way, that she was really there, and she touched me, and things like that.
When you heard the tearing sound, what do you think was causing that tearing sound?
This is actually known about in yoga, and this happens when the final knot at the top of the head is broken, and that's when a person can access heaven. This opening is actually called the mouth of heaven in Sanskrit, because it enables the person to go to heaven, or to communicate with heaven, or even to receive the gifts of heaven, the food of the gods, as it's usually called, which is soma or ambrosia, as the Greeks call it. So it's this liquid light substance that enters the brain upon illumination, I suppose you could say. You could say that this is a sort of enlightenment experience, even if it's only temporary. But you get the light in a way, and it suffuses your body, it changes you, it gives you wisdom and insight, and that sort of thing.
So do you think it's an energetic tearing, or what do you think is actually tearing?
Well, it's interesting because Buddhist monks in Tibet, they will actually try to open it up physically. So they will use a chisel and a hammer.
Wow.
And start hammering away. So they certainly think there's some sort of physical block there. And you see it, monks will usually shave their head just at that spot, or they will wear their hair in a knot, or there's all sorts of imagery that's associated with it. I think it's sort of subtle material block. So if there are different levels of the human body, according to yoga at least, and so there's the physical body, which we all know, and there's a subtle physical body, as they say, which is what comes with you when you die. So it still looks like a human body. I guess we would probably call it an astral body, but it's made of different matter. So it's not the physical matter that we're used to. And it's probably at that level that this sort of half energetic, half physical knot exists.
Some people describe, or they'll make the comment of tearing of the veil. Do you think that may be it?
Yes, probably. Yes.
Do you think you have any past life connection to Sumeria?
Probably yes. I was told so anyway. And when I first visited this exhibit, then I immediately felt connected to it. So I think there's probably something there.
You said you started meditating when you were 13. What got you into it at that age?
Well, as you know, I lived in India as a child for a while, and so I got interested in Hinduism and yoga and meditation and energy work and all that at quite an early age. And so I started reading books that were, more or less new age or esoteric. And most of them were actually pretty useless, if I think back. But it certainly showed me that I had an interest in this. So I started poking around and trying to read anything I could find and try to learn to meditate. And I think I always enjoyed being in a meditative state. So even as a child, I took long walks in nature, and I spent a lot of time just being in my head. Even when I wasn't meditating, I was usually in some sort of semi-meditative state most of the time.
So when you started doing the Kundalini on your own, did you just learn it from a book?
I didn't do it consciously. I didn't want to do it consciously. It was just something that came naturally to me. And I felt this energy, it wanted to rise, and I just didn't stop it. I just allowed it to happen. And I think it was probably preordained. I should note that this actually happened in December 2012, which, as you know, is exactly when the world was supposed to end. And my world certainly ended that day, in a way, because it's very much described as a death and rebirth. And I think that's very accurate, because the experience is very similar to an NDE in many ways, which I noticed when listening to your guests and other people as well. And so this expansion, I think, when your consciousness expands and comes back, the memory of that remains permanent. So you see yourself and the world very differently after that.
Once you've raised Kundalini, is that the end point, or do you raise it again?
Good question, yes. Most people, they don't raise it permanently. So it wouldn't be very practical anyway. If you live in a physical body, it's not very pleasant in a way to try to live a life with a permanently raised Kundalini. But reading about this from different authors, like Gopi Krishna, for instance, who is a well-known author on Kundalini, and he's had a very similar experience to me in a way, because he was also self-taught and didn't follow any particular school or teacher. He describes it in such a way that you would actually need to keep the Kundalini lodged in the crown chakra for 3 days and 3 nights, and then it would stay there permanently. And people who can achieve that, they are the ones we would call saints or enlightened sages. They are usually depicted with a halo around their head, because they have this permanent shining. So that takes quite some doing to achieve that. And I almost managed it once. Again, I wasn't actually trying to, but this was during the summer solstice. And it was a few years ago when I was particularly close to the goddess. I don't usually call her by her Sumerian name. I just refer to her as the goddess, because I realized after a while that there really is just one goddess, and she has many different forms, and she will appear in different cultures under different names. But if you understand the unitive state of consciousness, then it's not difficult to imagine that there's basically just one in the end. So that's what I think.
Do you think that the goddess would be also known as the Virgin Mary?
I would say that's the Christian version. I've actually looked into this a little bit, and there are some books written on the subject, like this one called the Cosmic Shekinah. And Shekinah is the Hebrew name for the divine feminine, I would say. And the Christian version of the Shekinah is the Holy Spirit. And if you look into the history of Christianity and Judaism in particular, you will find that it started with the Canaanite pantheon, which is where Yahweh, or Yahweh, as they say it, was the king of the gods, and his wife was Asherah, who later became syncretized as well into this sort of mother goddess figure within Christianity. But you can certainly see the historical connections between the Sumerian gods, who were known as the Anunnaki, because the sky god was known as An, and this became El in Canaan, and the sons of El were known as the Elohim, just as the sons of An were known as the Anunnaki. Mm-hmm. So I would say that this isn't accepted, of course, by scholars in general, but I think there's pretty strong evidence that the Elohim of the Bible are actually the Anunnaki of Sumer. And this is something I didn't know at the time, and I was very surprised when speaking to the Sumerian gods, and after a while they started to refer to themselves as the Elohim. And I was very surprised at that. But I think that's probably the truth, at least as far as I can see it.
You mentioned earlier that the block in your heart chakra was due to you becoming an atheist. Have you returned to being a Roman Catholic, or where are you now on your religious and spiritual beliefs?
I don't have any particular set beliefs. I don't believe in faith in itself. I think it's not a very useful thing to have, especially in the modern world. It's not about faith, but it's about knowing and experience. So you can only really relate to something that you have actually experienced yourself. So I think blind belief is not particularly useful, because you have to be there. You have to see it for yourself. You have to experience it. And I actually realized that is why we have so many atheists in the world today. And it's actually a growing number. And I used to be one of them, so I understand why people think and feel that way, why they try to deny the existence of God or the divine, or even a spiritual dimension to life. And it's actually, it makes sense from a rational perspective, but it's also blindness, because you shut yourself off from not only a higher power, but from a higher knowledge, a higher vantage point even, because there are so many things in this world that exist that we don't actually know of. We cannot see, we cannot perceive it in a normal state, but you can once you learn to change your state or level of consciousness. And if you learn how to do that, then you can actually experience and perceive other realities that wouldn't normally be accessible to you. And so I think that is why I believe in the divine, you could call it God if you wanted to call it that, but I just know that there is something more out there, and I definitely believe in the Elohim, because I make a differentiation there, because it's not exactly the same. And if you look at the Bible, there is a distinction between the Elohist and the Yahwist traditions. And if you look at Genesis, actually it starts with the Elohim created heaven and earth. And so they are the creators. And I know a lot of, especially people who are Jewish would not actually agree with this, but I think there is no question that the Elohim is a plural noun, and it refers to a pantheon of gods, but it's also true that it's one God because they have one mind. And I've actually experienced this. So when the Elohim speak, they speak in one voice. And you can see this, you can experience this when you connect to them, but it's also depicted in art when they show a chorus of angels, and it's like a harmony of voices. So I find that the Elohim, they speak in one voice, and it's a beautiful harmony of voices that you can hear.
So you're saying that the Elohim are actually the Anunnaki?
Yes.
Just changed names. Do you support Zachariah Sitchin's work about the Sumerians?
Yes, I should have known it would come up. No, I don't know. No, unfortunately, he was not very knowledgeable about the Sumerian language or the whole mythology. And there is probably a little bit of truth in the work that he did. And it's also important to note that some of his books he actually channeled. For instance, the book of Enki, it was a channeled book, which is not based on any Sumerian texts, or at least very loosely based. Mm-hmm. So I think he probably had the right idea about some things, but in general, I don't believe that the Anunnaki were actually physical beings, although some people might say that, but from what I have experienced, the gods, as you could call them in most cultures, because you also have the devas in Hinduism and Buddhism, they are light beings. And actually, if you look at the root of Elohim and the root of Deva, they both mean shining ones. And these beings, they are made of light, and they shine, and they have this sort of radiance that's unmistakable.
I don't know a lot about Sitchin's work. I never read his book. I just kind of seen what's popular on TV. But, I think he's part of the deal that the Anunnaki are aliens and they're going to return with Planet X. Maybe it's possible he misunderstood that they were, confusing aliens with light beings. And maybe this return of Planet X could be some other type of return.
Mm-hmm. No, I don't believe in, I think it's called Nibiru, actually.
Yeah, Nibiru, there you go, yes.
Yeah, Nibiru. There's nothing in the actual Sumerian texts, if you read them, that would indicate this 10th planet. So I don't know where he got that from, but it's not actually in the Sumerian texts. And
I'm sorry. Is it true that the Sumerians had a map of our solar system back in their time?
Yes, they did. Yes. You can see there's a famous clay tablet, probably, which depicts the solar system. I think it's the god Enki, actually, sitting in his chair, and he's surrounded by what look like stars, but are probably planets. And there's a number of planets there. But I think there probably is a Planet X, by the way. I just don't think that it would be habitable, or that the gods really are there. I think that's very far-fetched. But I have to tell you that within the Buddhist and Hindu traditions, there are a lot of other planets that are mentioned, which are usually not in our solar system. So, and many of them are actually astral planets. So they don't exist in the physical sense, but they are in the astral realm. But there are many, many stories. For instance, in the Mahabharata, the son of the god Indra is called Arjuna. And Indra is the same Indo-European god as Zeus. And he's also related to Yahweh in a way, the biblical Yahweh. So in this story in the Mahabharata, he actually takes a heavenly chariot, which could be interpreted as a spacecraft. And it's described that he flies by the planets, and then he sees the stars flying by, and he gets to this other planet where his father Indra lives. And the planet is actually described in some detail. And so we get a description of this other planet. So, I think it's a possibility in some ways. It's not an entirely harebrained idea, but I don't really see much evidence for it right now. But, with all the UAP revelations, we might know pretty soon.
Yes.
We might be surprised at what's going to come out.
What part of the Mahabharata was this in that they talk about that?
Well, I can try to find the exact passage for you if you want, and I'll send it to you later.
Great.
But I read this when I was a child, so I don't remember the exact details, but it stuck with me.
Isn't there something within the Mahabharata where they're describing a nuclear explosion?
Yes, definitely. I mean, they have a lot of magical weapons in the Mahabharata. That's during the big final battle in the end, where they use this. I think it's called the weapon of Brahma, if I remember correctly, which can only be used once, and is described as this huge light. And the after effects are very similar to nuclear fallout, because people are poisoned and their hair starts falling out, and they have boils all over their body. So I think it's possible it talks about nuclear explosion. But there are actually even more impressive weapons during this time when Arjuna is on this other planet, the planet of Indra. He's given the task of fighting the enemies of the gods. And he takes a chariot and various weapons that are given to him. And some of them are like lightning or projectiles or rockets. It looks like something out of Star Wars or Star Trek.
Do you think that book is based on history, or do you think those are just stories made up?
The Mahabharata?
Yes.
I think it's definitely, it's the same with all ancient epics. They are always based on history. And then, as time goes by, they add to it and they embellish it. So I'm sure that they added to it over the centuries, and they actually had to sit down one time and say, "That's it. We're going to limit the Mahabharata to 100,000 verses, which is a lot, And then they actually sat down and said, "Okay, that's it. Nobody can add to this anymore."
Right.
Yes, of course, poets and priests and mystics, they kept adding to it all the time. But I think the core story is definitely true.
Kind of sounds like the Bible and the Council of Nicaea, where at some point they decided, okay, what's in the Bible and what's not.
Yes, it's a very similar story.
All right, Christian, I've gone over time with you. So before we go, do you have anything that you would like to promote? Do you have a website or anything that you would like to just mention to everybody?
Not yet. I will probably start a YouTube channel. Because I want to add to some of the things I said here. And I just realized that it's a very good way to talk about these spiritual experiences and whatnot. But at the moment, I'm reachable at Christian.Koncz, which is KONCZ @gmail.com, and people can reach me by email.
All right, great. So you're open to people contacting you if they want to ask you questions or chit chat or whatever.
Yes, of course, yeah.
Well, once you get your YouTube up and running, be sure to send me the link and I'll go back and put it in this video.
Okay.
All right. Well, before we finish up, do you have one positive message that you can leave us with?
Consciousness is infinite, and you are infinite. So don't worry about anything, because whatever happens in this life, you're just going to go on living as infinite consciousness. And that's your true state. That's your source. That's your destination. So just stop worrying about small things in life. It's not worth it. And try to find a way to reach the absolute, to become, to fulfill your true potential.
Well, that's a great message. Christian, thank you so much again for being my guest. I really appreciate you. And enjoy the rest of your day over there in Hungary.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks for watching the Jeff Mara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.